Lars, firstly, it's a pleasure to have you here on Fuse. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. It's the pleasure's all mine, actually.
So, just to explain to people, I'm in Canada, you're in Singapore, is that right?
Yes, about 100 kilometers away from the equator.
Uh, the last time I was in Singapore, we landed at Changi and everything was clear. We landed, picked up our bags, got to the outside of the airport, and the rains just torrentially came down upon us. And then 20 minutes later, everything's steaming, everything's drying out, and you couldn't tell half an hour later that it had even rained. Is this a normal occurrence?
It's the tropics. Yes, that's what happens, right? So it's same like it. The sun gets up at 7 o'clock and it sets at 7 o'clock. There might be a variation of 10 minutes during the course of the year. That's living close to the equator in the tropics. Yes. We have monkeys running around in some public parks, and every now and then we have the random alligator spotting, but it's a safe, wonderful tropical island.
I previously, for people who regularly follow Fuse, I previously said that Luxembourg is one of my favorite places on the planet. I will follow that up by saying, without doubt, Singapore is also one of my favorite places on the planet. Now, Lars, on to what we're here to discuss and what we're here to talk about, which falls into two categories. Um, Recently, and I'll bring my notes over here so that I can see them. You can tell I wear glasses, but my eyes are at the end of the day. So time zones. I'm at the end of the day. You're at the beginning of the day. Um, Recently, you worked on and released an article for Forbes on ethics as the voice
Mhm.
for PR championing truth and transparency over embellishments. Obviously, and I say obviously, and I would hope that the rest of the business community would think this way, that ethics, building trust, speaking truth, sticking to core values, and taking responsibility are at the core of what we should do, certainly during a crisis, but also in everyday business. Are we seeing that some people aren't, you know, keeping up to date on this, and they risk kind of fluffing things and giving a flowery picture to distract?
Well, I think we've always seen that there's no ultimate truth. There are always different kind of light sources that shine on an object. So the question is, do you acknowledge that there are different perspectives and give transparency which perspective you're coming from? I think that's the core part, right? I mean, if you look at some of the great PR people in history, like Lord Bell, always said, um, anybody or everybody should have the right for an attorney in the court of public opinion. I wouldn't go that far that every dictator should have that kind of right to speak his version of the truth if it goes too far. But I believe for the general profession that we represent, we really have a duty. And I like to quote always Spider-Man: "With great responsibilities come with great powers come great responsibilities." Right. So can we look into the mirror? And I think that barrier is different from every professional in every kind of job you do. But for me, it means we as PR professionals really have that responsibility to make sure that we don't manipulate people, that we don't tell falsehoods, that we don't just put business over everything else. I think we all have a greater responsibility for the planet, for the community. But I think that kind of perception and approach to ethics is sometimes a very personal one, unfortunately, and not just a general professional credo for all professions out there.
There's something that we say over here in our company, which is everyone has a story to tell, and if you take that one step further, everyone has a right to have that story heard, and it's down to the audience to make the decision from the information that they've been given as to where they align or they don't align with that story that has been told. And for us as professionals, I've always believed that if you start from a place of truth, you can't really go wrong, and that level of taking responsibility when there is accountability to be had is far better in the long run for any organization than, looking at it from a perspective of how we can get away with something, because that's never going to lead to a place of, well, success, frankly, is it?
Well, it's that saying like lies have short legs. They don't get very far in the long run. Or like somebody else said, the good thing about always telling the truth is you don't need to remember what you've said.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't get caught out telling the truth. You can get caught out telling a lie.
And I think that's the interesting part is over time, our opinions and perceptions of the truth might actually change. So we might get called out of that on that.
Lars, I'm really intrigued. Um, I watched recently the replay of the PRCA Southeast Asia Global Communications Forum, an excellent conference. Just from your perspective, when it comes to, lots of people look at the PR industry, communication and marketing, and a lot of it is incredibly heavily centric around North America, New York and London and, Tokyo, etc. How do you find when we look at these pan-regional conferences that they address different needs in different parts of a region?
It is sometimes easier to do it, for example, for North America or for Europe, but there are regions in the world that are just more different in terms of culture, development status of the economy, languages, what are cultural norms. So it's great as an eye opener, but sometimes you have to acknowledge just because that works in Vietnam, it might not work in Myanmar. And I give you a very simple example because we're working on a lot of environmental projects. Everybody's talking about climate change and these kind of things. For in Indonesia, one of the biggest things for trucks is going to the Euro 4 norm, while Europe is at 7 plus, right? Or talking electric. So just the circumstances, the situation is so different that if you have in some countries people not having shelter when it's raining versus are you at the top 10, 20% of change that you can do, or are you at the 80% bracket, right? And that affects how you talk about things, what you can address, how you can address it.
So when you look at, let's say, because I my time in Southeast Asia is, statistically limited compared to the time that I've spent in Europe and North America. Um, when you look at the marketplace, let's say, as the MD of Precious Communications, when you look at the opportunities that you see in different countries that are at different stages, what are the challenges? Where are the doors opening? And where is it that you look at a line of going, economically, maybe it's not right to look at that market yet because it's just such a high barrier?
That's a tricky question because if you do that, also means you place your bets, and theoretically you have to like love all your children and you can't have favorites. But from a business point of view, you have to make your bets, right? I mean, if you look at Southeast Asia overall, it's like 650 million people. It's a pre-COVID GDP growth of 4 to 6% in average. So it's one of the booming next 10 years opportunities of our lifetime. And I always look at it from when I was in DHL many, many years ago. One of the board members said, Lars, and he was so grateful, said, in my lifetime, China was opening up and I was part of that journey. And I was like, damn it, I missed that opportunity. So what will be my China? So I always keep saying Southeast Asia will be my China opportunity because we're at the right moment. Internet penetration is there, a hungry young population, economic growth. It's in between the big global poles, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Europeans, the Americans. Economic things are there, supply chain diversification. So it's amazing to be here. So then in which order to sometimes over the last 10 years, I've seen it depends opportunistically. Where do our clients see it's working, right? And then it's up sometimes to exchange rates because global IT vendors charge in US dollars. And if suddenly your currency drops by 50%, the product is unaffordable. And then it might shift from Philippines to Malaysia or to Thailand as the next big thing, or to Vietnam. Or so it moves around. But I think the big bets are just obvious. Singapore is the hub here. Then you have Indonesia just by pure size and good solid government over time. Malaysia has everything in its hand, but political struggles. Thailand, I don't know how many coups they had, but the economy was actually growing. It's one of the manufacturing hubs for semiconductors, automotive in the region. Vietnam got hit quite badly by COVID, but I mean that's just a stability part. Investors love stability. No government change over a long period of time means stability. So FDIs are flowing, right? So I wouldn't necessarily put my bets on Myanmar at the moment after the dictatorship took back control. But I mean, it's 11 countries that we're looking after. And it's just opportunities are plenty, right?
So when it comes to working with clients that are wanting to create awareness into certain markets, and we've done a previous episode where we spoke to people in different parts of Southeast Asia, but when it comes to firms from one area, one country wanting to create awareness and grow into another country, do you find that there is national pride that comes in the barriers that go up? We'd rather in Malaysia support a Malaysian firm. We in Thailand would rather support Thai firms, etc. And then it becomes, well, you're not from here thing. Or in Southeast Asia, generalization, I'll accept, huge population. But is there an element of nationalism and protectionism between countries, which we're increasingly seeing in different areas of the world?
I believe it really depends on which part of the population you're talking to and what kind of products, right? There are the national pride products like who owns Hawker Foods. There was a big discussion between Singapore and Malaysia about who can protect it under the United Nations World Heritage kind of thing. Malaysians say, no, we have the Hawker Food. No, the Singaporeans say that, but it's a combined culture. I think a lot of times, and that's interesting. I'm originally from Germany, so that made in Germany stamp still goes a long way. And what's interesting, it's politically just interesting, perceptive. In Europe, Germany has a very high historical burden to carry. In most parts of Asia, it was the Japanese who were the bad guys. Sorry to say that's simply, it's not that simple, but Germany doesn't have that badly tinted kind of heritage to drive the made in Germany brand here, for example, right? Um, Singapore as an example, people are normally not very fond of made in Singapore products. Of course, the government is pushing that up. You have that in every country, right? One interesting brand example, by the way, is do you know Maggi noodles? Maggi. They're popular all over the world. It's South America, in El Salvador, whole streets red and yellow, right? Every country believes it's their brand. I think it's under the Nestle umbrella, from Maggie out of Germany before they got acquired. Germany, Switzerland, right? But it's one of those fantastic brands that made it so local that people believe it's their local brand.
Ownership is a fascinating thing, and historical ties and
Yeah.
values of organizations for sure. When it comes to looking at the region from a point of public relations, communications, and marketers, what is it like in terms of, business markets lean more towards straight advertising, or they believe in the power of public relations, or it's marketing, or, as I would imagine, for a significant proportion, it's the fine art and the science of the communication mix. Who gets the largest slice of the pie? And let's leave advertisers on the outside of this particular one.
Um, it's a little bit a question of industry and flavor du jour, right? Um, when we work a lot with startups, So I give you that example, right? Depending on which stage they are, they believe in different things. At whatever 5 years, growth hacking was the biggest thing in the wider marketing mix. The problem of growth hacking, it's lower funnel optimization. You can optimize it like crazy, but it dries up after a while if you don't fill it in, right? Then from stage share, it's like the typical crossing the chasm kind of theory. Like you have your early adopters, word of mouth that works, but at some point you need to build trust if you want to have market adoption, and that's where do you see PR fits in? And I think the biggest confusion, not just in Southeast Asia but globally, is like, is PR a subset of marketing, very tactical, or is it the biggest strategic thing there is? For me, the answer is both. And I think that confuses the heck out of people that have not worked in that. And they are sometimes, they're just following the next Pied Piper that plays the nicest or loudest tune, right? So a lot of what we're doing, especially with startups, is education. Where can we help? And also, where can't we help? PR is not a conversion tool to drive up online sales. There's no direct correlation. We can help you with differentiation, with your USB, with trust, authority building, all these kind of things. It's a fantastic tool if you're looking for funding rounds and you have to talk about why you are the next big thing and your industry is the next big thing. So I don't think there's a single answer to that. I always tell our teams and our clients is, let's forget what we believe is the best thing. Let's look at the target audience and what's their media consumption mix. That defines the channel. The channel influences the flavor and the packaging, and we have the message, but we need to marry that. Funny part is, if you work with some more conservative organizations where have leaders in their 60s, sometimes for them only local broadsheet paper counts, because that's the only thing that they read, so that's their ultimate truth.
Absolutely. I couldn't disagree with that. And I can tell you, in this part of Canada, um, in very much the same way, it will be local radio above all other channels, regardless of the value and the numbers and the data, and they won't necessarily look at where the audience is, but it's where they consume their material because they trust that news outlet and they have a greater trust for it. Lars, I honestly could talk to you for hours on end because you're in a fascinating place in the world, one of my favorites. And having watched your sessions online, also a brilliant mind on you, and please don't blush at that. If people wanted to find out more about you and your organization, how could they do that?
Just Google Precious Communications, preciouscomms.com. Very simple. Or if you can remember my name, Google that. There are not that many people that can pronounce my name or find it. So I think the company is the safer bet.
Lars, thank you so much for joining us here on Fuse.
Thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure.